You're welcome, everyone. Let me greet the people that are here. Anu, you're welcome. Thank you for the support. Jumi Becca says, fingers crossed, oh yes. Aduni Dam Dam. To sing, okay? Yes, you're welcome. To sign. So welcome everyone. Bumi, I can see Bumi, Bionic Mba, and a lot of good people in right here. Quenisha, you're welcome. Official Inyechuku, welcome everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to start the conversation. I am your host today. My beautiful name is Oludolapo Remido Adewale. And I'm so excited to be doing this, not alone, but someone very special. You know, I've had different Instagram lives with different amazing people, but this one is very special to me because, should I start a story? Story time. This is my younger sister. I'm doing drum rolls. I have the pleasure of inviting my sister, Abimbola Wale-Makinde. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Please let's
Thanks
give
for
a
having
virtual
me.
applause. The emojis of welcome, like love, like fire, like hot. Let's put it in the comment section. Yes, some people are saying drum rolls. Thank you. You're welcome. Today, our topic is communication in the early years.
Yeah.
And my guest today has prepared, she has researched, she has done lots of reading, lots of experience under her belt. She's just ready to unpack the topic in the finest details. But before I get the conversation rolling, I'd like you to listen to a part of our profile. Our profile is extended, but we're just going to summarize it in few paragraphs so that we won't take today to revealing our profile. Even though I know part of my life, but I wouldn't come here to say that, you know that thing about big sisters always thinking they know all about you. I think I'm doing that right now. Abimbola is the board certified speech and language pathologist, also known as speech therapist, with extensive experience working with children and also adults. She holds a master's degree in speech pathology from Griffith University, Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia. I'm a Winlewa. She also holds a diploma of early childhood education and care. Currently, she specializes in working with people with special needs across the lifespan, and her areas of interest include augmentative and alternative communication, otherwise known as AAC, language and social communication skills. In the past, she has served as clinical educator for final year master's degree students from Griffith University. Now she's the clinical director at Olives Allied Health Services. It's a community-based allied health organization that services our local community, talking about someone that puts the well-being of our local community at heart. This is so phenomenal. Abimbola is married with children, and in her free time, she enjoys spending time with her loved ones, and of course, she loves singing. I know that one right from childhood. Welcome, my guest, Abimbola Wale-Makinde.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So I would like to start hot. Let's dive into the conversation. Can you tell us the communication challenges? I know there are lots of them. Just let's give us the opening statement. Take us into that journey. What are those communication challenges that children present with in the early years from your experience?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, fantastic.
So in terms of communication, when we think about communication, it's two main things. It's speech and language. And with children, because they're still in that developmental phase, most of the challenges that they experience, the biggest one would be late talking. A child that you would consider a late talker, that is not speaking at the normal age that is expected of them. That's one of the biggest common ones. We've got childhood apraxia of speech. We've got speech sound disorders, when a child is mispronouncing words in certain different ways. We've also got something called developmental language disorders. That is when a child is having difficulty understanding what is being said to them and having difficulty expressing that same language to other people, whether familiar people or unfamiliar people. We've also got another common one, stuttering. That's just the general name for it, but we usually like to call it a fluency disorder, when an individual has difficulty with being fluent in their speech. That's another big one. The other ones are mostly co-occurring with different ranges of disabilities, so I wouldn't go into that yet, but those are the big ones that we see in children. And when we talk about early years, we're talking, in Australia here it's 0 to 5, but generally I would just term it, for the purpose of this discussion, I would classify that as 0 to 10, because children are still kind of developing. So yes, those are the popular challenges that children experience. Thank you.
Fantastic. Now, you did mention something that you classify differently in Australia, 0 to 5. In Nigeria, too, there are different classifications, especially when you see different schools with different naming. Some will say, oh, nursery class, reception class, primary class, and you find different classifications in different schools.
That's right.
But everyone is still in the primary school, basically. Now, when do you think a parent should start getting worried about communication challenges? Let's even take that angle.
Yes, thank you. That's a very brilliant question. We were made to communicate. We were created to communicate. Before now, the idea was for parents to wait and see. Children would grow out of it, but there's new evidence. There's a new body of evidence to suggest that the wait and see approach is not the right one. It's always important that parents, when they start noticing difficulties with communication in their children, they should get onto it as early as possible, because sometimes children don't grow out of it. And even when they seemingly grow out of it, they might be delayed in other areas, because as you know, communication is the bedrock for how we live life. So it's important that even from as young as age 18 months, if you're noticing that your child is not, and this is not to say to go into panic mode or to start comparing your child with another child or another sibling, but once you notice that there's something that looks like a bit of a communication delay with your child, it is best to start getting help, because there's evidence to suggest that early intervention with children yields better results than just waiting and seeing how it goes. So yes, as early as possible, 18 months, I would suggest strongly. Yeah.
18 months, fantastic. Now, in your experience, who picks up communication challenges more, the parents or the teachers or the caregivers in this case? Why
Yes.
I'm saying teachers is because in Nigeria, we find many people going to school early. So that's why I'm including teachers here. So in your experience, who do you think picks up these challenges more?
Thank you. There's actually no yes and no answer to that question, and I would explain why. Depending on what the child is presenting with, if it's just a speech sound disorder, it might not be picked up till when the child starts talking fluently. But if it's something like a disability that is significant, usually the parents would have known, or they would have noticed something. For example, if it's ADHD, most times the parents would know that, oh, there's something
What is
about this child that is different.
ADHD? Can you break that down for the benefit
Yes.
of our listeners?
So ADHD is just an acronym for attention deficit hyperactive disorder. So attention deficit hyperactive
We're going
disorder.
to get to that
Yes.
later.
So I'm just giving like a case-by-case scenario. Sometimes moms, who are usually the primary caregivers, would pick up stuff about children, but some speech difficulties or communication difficulties, you wouldn't know what they look like until the child is speaking full sentences. Some communication difficulties because, for example, late talking. Usually the parent will know because the child is not talking at the normal age, at that communication milestone age. So it depends on what the child presents with. It depends on what the child's communication difficulties is. But yeah, usually teachers, even if the parent has not picked it up, by the time the child gets to school, teachers are switched on. They do this every day, so they would definitely pick it up. Yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Now, let's go to the foundation.
Yes.
What are the causes of some of the, communication challenges you've highlighted? I know we're still going to break some of them down, but what are the general causes? If you're asked, what are those things? Because when we talk about diseases, so to speak, we say, oh, maybe you are not exercising well, it's causing obesity, something like that. Can we say the same, that there are causes of communication challenges?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. I would thread very cautiously with with that word, because with children, there's something we call risk factor. So, for example, with late talking, children that are late talkers, there's been evidence to suggest that children that are late talkers, if there's someone in the family that has been a late talker, there's a higher risk. So we would call it like a higher risk of that child also being a late talker. It also depends on what the child, like I said before, what the child is having challenges with, because most of these difficulties are genetic and environmental. So it could be a combination of both. It could be a standalone thing, like as we know in ASD. Sometimes it's not genetic. It could just be something that's how that child was created. It could be a chemical imbalance. So it depends on what. I wouldn't say that a parent is directly given that child what the child presents with. And this is for any parents on this platform right now that has a child that's struggling with one or two things. The first thing we need to realize is that it is not your fault that that child has what you think they have. Sometimes children develop differently, and it is what it is. We just have to look at how do we manage this situation. So there's no direct, for example, with stuttering, there's no known cause. They've tried to do a lot of, academic research. They can't really pinpoint one reason why people stutter, but it happens, and when it happens, we deal with it. So that's why we're here to support people that may be experiencing that. I hope that answers the question a little bit more.
Yes, yes. So there are really no particular causes, so to speak. We can just put them under the umbrella of environmental causes or sometimes genetic causes. Is that safe to say that?
Yes, depending on what.
And you also mentioned, okay, you also mentioned that if a parent shouldn't blame
themselves.
Shouldn't put the blame and say, oh, it's because I didn't speak early in life. That's why my child isn't speaking early, something like that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So now that we've talked about some likely causes or under the umbrella, let's talk about stuttering. Stuttering is one thing. Recently, I saw, as a diction coach, we see a lot. And I saw someone advertising that the person needs a diction coach for I think the person is a man, is child who stutters. Now, I was taken aback that, okay, this child stutters. Is the first thing to recommend to that child, is it a diction coach, or does this person need to see a pediatrician or a speech therapist? What would you suggest in that kind of situation?
Yeah, we see a lot in the community when we hear things like this. So, like I said before, stuttering is a fluency disorder. It is not because the person doesn't want to speak. If you look at people that stutter, they sing very well. Usually, they can sing fluently. Well, usually, it doesn't affect that side of the brain. So, it's when you think about people that stutter, it gets worse when there's anxiety. That has been put upon them by the environment. And when I'm saying environment, I mean maybe the parents or siblings, or there's been a bit of bullying that's been happening around that. So they get more anxious, and it just, all my experience, it just worsens the situation. It never makes it better. So with people that stutter, usually it presents in different ways. Some people it's just sound prolongations, like if they want to say the word dog, they might go dog. Some people it's da 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 da. So that's a sound repetition. That's a different presentation, and the way we would treat that is different. And we always strongly suggest that with people that stutter, if by age 4 the child starts stuttering and it doesn't resolve, it's better to start seeing a therapist straight away. I wouldn't really say a diction coach is the because what the diction coach does is it helps you to pronounce your words clearly, to pronounce your words and probably the sounds in the words. But the way stuttering presents is different. It's something it's how the brain is processing speech. So it's different. It's sort of like you're treating something from a different angle. So I'm not really sure that that's the right approach. I mean, I'm talking from my experience, but yes, I think what that person would need first is to have
Oh
strategies
my
to
goodness.
manage those disfluencies as they go. And then if they now have sound disorders, then probably they might be looking at some different form of intervention.
Okay, fantastic. I like that you established the fact that you said stuttering is a fluency disorder. So you would advise in that scenario to see a therapist instead of just throwing that child only to the diction coach. Okay,
Yeah,
fantastic. Let's move further.
yeah,
Let's also look at some other communication challenges. You did mention ADHD.
yes.
Now, we see a lot of children, maybe in primary school, in even secondary school. It looks like their attention is so different. Let me
Mhm.
put it like that, different. It's either they are so hyperactive, and parents are saying, ah, ijogbon, omo yen ni ijogbon, or teachers are saying, omo
Yes.
yen ni ijogbon, ijogbon in Yoruba means like troublesome. So let's talk about ADHD. Educate us on ADHD and what parents need to do for a child that has it.
Yeah, like we all know, people have different temperaments. So ADHD is not a temperament. It's a condition where someone struggles with attention, struggles to focus for an extended period of time. With children, especially with boys of a younger age, they might not have ADHD, they might just be active children. Maybe they just like to play sports or they like to run. But it gets to a point that the child cannot regulate themselves. So if you find a child that in the classroom they can't sit still when the other kids are sitting still, they interrupt just abruptly. There's clinical signs and ways that we diagnose this, but and the diagnosis would usually come from a pediatrician with support from different therapists. But where I'm going with this is that ADHD is how you know that that child has ADHD is that in every environment that child is having this difficulty. So if the child can regulate themselves in maybe two environments, so like at home and at school, but it's just a particular environment where they're having trouble, it's possible that that child is just hyperactive. But if the child is having those difficulties of attention, inability to stay still when it's expected of them, or if they're having trouble with social communication, so they just interrupt, they can't take turns, they have significant meltdowns. I've seen kids that they would throw themselves to the floor and roll, and this is not a cultural thing. I've seen children, even like from where we come from, that do that. So it's beyond culture. You just notice that that child has significant difficulty regulating themselves in every area, then we would be looking at assessing that child for that diagnosis. Yes. So that's just one of the very many this I wouldn't call it conditions, but difficulties that children experience, and it's more common than we think. And another thing I needed to add here was a lot of adults, if they go back and really look at how they cope in life, a lot of people actually might find that they actually have a little bit of ADHD. Just from
Are you
yeah, just
saying
from
that
my
there are
interactions
some
with people,
adults,
I've picked it up. Yes.
are you saying that there are some adults even now in Nigeria that still have a tiny, tiny bit of
Look, sis,
ADHD.
I would not say yes or no, but another thing that ADHD is that is quite prevalent with people with ADHD is impulsivity. So they're very impulsive. Yeah, yes, because their brain is working faster than and it's a blessing in a way. Some like they're quite good at what they're good at. So there's a lot of strength in people that have ADHD. So it's not a condition that people should just write off. They're actually they can complete tasks in a set time because they're quite, you know, yeah, that's how they were made. So it's just to know how to manage those difficulties.
Okay,
Sorry?
fantastic. What can a parent do? A parent that maybe by chance, hardly do we go to the hospitals for such things in this part of the country, but maybe by chance they now told the parents that, Madam or Sir, your child has this particular thing. What should be done? Is there like you said something like they complete tasks early? Is there like a particular activity that should be given to that child constantly to get that child, channel that energy?
Mm.
Please educate us.
So with children with ADHD, one thing that they thrive on is they need breaks. So, for example, when I'm working with a child that has, I don't really work with children at the moment, but when I'm working with an individual that has ADHD, they thrive when we give them structure and routine. So we also give them lots of breaks because they get overwhelmed fast. So having before a parent starts seeing a therapist, I'm aware that sometimes it's hard to get a therapist, but that's why we have a body of knowledge online that's really resourceful. So with children like that, it's good for them to have fixed routines, because when you change your routine with a child that has ADHD, that's when you see those behaviors, that's when you see those meltdowns. So it's important that number one, the parent does not blame themselves. And I would say my language here. Don't think that the child just has ijogbon, because the child cannot control what's going on with them. So the more you put pressure on the child to fix what's going on with them, the worse the situation. Trust me, it will get worse. So you've got to recognize that this child is not abnormal. This child is not abnormal. Don't blame the child for whatever that you see the child doing. The solution is what we should. When I say solution, it's the management of that child, because they thrive well on routines. So having daily schedules and giving them the expectation, we're going to be here for 2 hours and then we will move on to something else. Because they have so much energy too, it's important that the parent gives them structure so that they can have time to rest, because a child with ADHD might not know when it's time to rest, and they can get sick from that. So you don't want that. And also, being able to sometimes people with ADHD might have learning difficulties, not because they're not smart, but because they have difficulty focusing academically. So if you think about it, it's such a ripple effect. If the child cannot focus well in class, sometimes I've had to speak with teachers and to say, this child has ADHD. Can this sit in the front where there's less distractions? Sometimes we use fidget toys. So with their hands, they might have sensory difficulties. So they might just be fiddling with things every time. When they see things they want to touch, when they're going down the staircase, they would touch things. That's because that's the way their brain is processing things. So sometimes we give them, I work with occupational therapists, and they would recommend fidget toys, things that the child can fiddle with quietly, just to get their brain focused on that, so that they're not disrupting the class, but they can still learn. Sometimes we give them chairs or things that are softer, so that they're not, just fidgety. There's many things you can do with a child with ADHD, but I think the parent needs a lot of education, so that when the child is doing it, let's say the child is sensitive to noise, avoiding those areas could be something that you could consider, or giving them a set time. Jimmy is saying she feel like she should get ADHD. That's my friend from Australia.
Oh, thank you very much, Jimmy, for that one. You said because I need rest. Okay, fantastic.
We all do.
And Abimbola also mentioned the fact that parents need to just tell those children, this sort of children, give them schedules. They need to know what to do next and at when as at when due, so that they will be able to channel their energy well. And let me just take a little bit of 10 seconds break and recognize my brother. So the family is complete. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got my brother on this call as well. Michael, you're welcome and joining us on this call. So it's a family thing, a family affair today on a serious level. Okay, Abimbola, you mentioned something about ripple effect, domino effect of this particular condition on even learning sometimes. Now, is this any way linked to communication as well?
Yes.
If a child has this attention deficit hyperactivity disorder,
Yes.
how is it linked to communication?
That's a very good question. Children with ADHD, like I said, they process information differently due to different sensory processing disorders that they might be experiencing. They get overwhelmed fast too. So in that way, the receptive language skills. So when I say receptive language skills, the way they understand what's being said to them would be completely different. Now, a lot of adults that have ADHD have learned to mask this, and I've seen this time and time again, that you're talking to them, they're shaking their head, but they're not getting anything in. So what we suggest, one of the first things that we teach parents is to learn to keep verbal instructions very simple. So don't do two-step instructions for children with ADHD. One-step instructions and getting the child to repeat it back to you. Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you to do? It's one of those very fundamental. I've seen that when parents do this, they come back and say, wow, that works like magic. Sometimes the child might need prompting because, like I said, it's a different thought process to how a typically developing person. Notice that I didn't say a normal person because we're all normal. Someone with ADHD and someone that we would classify as typically developing, the way they would process information would be different because their brain, like I said, is fast. It's going very quickly. So they need to be assisted to slow down. They might be good with some concepts like mathematics and things like that, but with literal concepts, they might have some difficulty. So you want to help the child to. Sometimes they also get what's the word now? They get overwhelmed when it's a messy environment. So we like to keep things as clear and clean as possible so that they can focus. So yes, ADHD does affect how people communicate, and sometimes they take things literally. So I saw a very funny video of a mother telling a child, a picture actually, that I'll just call the child Rex. Rex, you haven't touched your sandwich. You need to touch your sandwich before I give you ice cream. And this child touched the ice cream and said, touched that sandwich and said, Mom, I've touched the ice cream. The sandwich, can I please have the ice cream now? So they take things just literally. But this is more common with
Okay.
people on the spectrum rather than ADHD in reality. So yes. So the way they receive information and express it might be different. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now is a good time to ask you to start sending your questions. If you've got questions for our guest Abimbola today, just type them in the comment section, or if you have access to my DM, please send your messages or your questions. So let's start with it before we close today. We've got like less than 10 minutes more on today's
I have time.
show. You're enjoying the show already, like we should continue. Yes, in case you just joined us, it's been an interesting conversation so far. Abimbola has made us to understand that communication is the bedrock of many things,
Yes.
so it's very important to get it right. And parents shouldn't do the blame game. They shouldn't do the blame game on uh, one of their children, maybe not speaking early in life. Is a combination of so many factors.
Yeah.
And she also mentioned that we should try to pick things early as 18 months to be able to be observant and do the needful. And she also talked about activities that can be done or intervention things that can be done for a child who sort of has ADHD,
And ASD,
maybe
yes.
an
Yeah.
ASD.
There's a lot, yeah.
Well, I think after now, we'll go to that ASD. I really want you to break that down further for us. Now, talking about ASD, what is ASD? Do we have ASD in Nigeria, or it's just Oyinbo disorder, so to speak? Do we have
Okay.
it in Nigeria? I think we have it. What can be done? What can a parent or a teacher that is really vested in teaching this young ones,
Yeah,
what can he or she do?
yeah. Um, so all my Nigerians on this platform, there's ASD in Nigeria. Trust me.
Hmm.
Um, we might not acknowledge it, but there is. So ASD is an acronym for autism spectrum disorder, and it's a condition related to brain development. It affects how a person sees things or socializes with things. Now, I've said autism spectrum disorder. It's a spectrum. And when you think about a spectrum, it has different, from like mild in terms of severity, from like mild to severe. So
Like not
someone might,
right.
so it's a range. It might present in different ways. Here in Australia, there's three main levels. That there's a when we give diagnosis, when the pediatrician comes up with diagnosis, it's basically three levels, and I'm just going to use that because that's my experience. Level one, two, and three, with level three being the highest in terms of severity. Level one, we usually like to call them, I mean, in everyday parlance, we call them high functioning ASD people with living with ASD, and it's not a disease. Okay, it's not a disease. When someone has ASD, it's not a disease. It's just a condition that they have that makes them different. We actually like to use the term they're neuro what's the word now, neurodivergent. So the brain works in a different way. Okay, I use an example of someone that takes things literally. So autism spectrum disorder is real, and it's a combination of genetic and environmental influences. I say that with caution because I don't want people to start thinking, did I give my child ASD? But we find that people have ASD, and when they have it, rather than start thinking about what did I do to cause this child to have ASD, I think the best thing any parent can do for their child is to look for management strategies. How can I help this child through life? I have seen people with ASD that have gotten married, had kids, are thriving in the society. I've actually seen an ASD individual before that is actually a PhD candidate. So people with, and this is ASD like significant. So people with ASD can have lives, they can function well in the society. They're actually very smart people. Most of the people that I know, I've seen a particular client before that could work the hardest mathematics in 5 seconds. I have never seen anything like that in my life. If I tell this particular client to add 270 something plus something something, they would give me in 5 minutes, in 5 seconds. So it's a spectrum. This Asperger's syndrome, it goes all the way to level three. So it's a spectrum and it's not a disease. When parents, most parents start picking up the signs in their children because it usually presents first with a delay in speech, and sometimes they have difficulty maintaining eye contact, or they don't babble as much as other babies. Yeah, we just see those clinical signs when they're young, and we kind of know, but we usually like the parents to come to the realization themselves, because that's when you get the best out of that family. Yeah. So right now I went a bit off
Who
track. Yeah, but
can parents see immediately they start noticing the signs? Who should they see?
okay, the first point of contact would be the family doctor in Nigeria. Here would be a general practitioner. So if you're noticing some delays across board, so ASD is not just when a child cannot speak. So it's also the way they use language. It's also the way they socially communicate, and it could also come with other co-occurring difficulties. But when you start noticing those differences in your child, the best thing the best thing, I will talk about that. The best thing to do is to see the doctor first. If your doctor is dismissing the signs and telling you that the child would grow out of it, and you can see that this child is struggling, because if they don't get that help, they will most likely struggle. So if you're noticing that, if you get a doctor that agrees with what you are saying, the next point of call would be a pediatrician, because they work directly with children, and that's their profession. That's what they're trained to do. And then here in Australia, when you get a referral for the pediatrician, they then send that child off to do assessments. So with a psychologist, if possible, with an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, or any other person. And if the child is already in school, they get reports from school. And they use all that to then make a diagnosis to say this child has this um, um, condition, and then they can rate the child based on the levels. But I would suggest strongly to see the doctor first, because especially a doctor that specializes in children. So that would be a pediatrician.
Okay. Before I think yesterday or 2 days ago, when we were having a conversation, we talked about swallowing as well,
Yeah,
and
that's one
saying
of
that,
our ranges. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So briefly, like in 30 seconds, because we still have lots of ground to cover and we don't have time. So in 30 seconds, can you tell us the scope of practice of a speech therapist? We've got a question. I can see the question. We're going to go back to it. So in 30 seconds, what does a speech therapist like you, what do you do?
Let me try. Okay. A lot of people think speech therapists just work on talking. We actually do, that's just one of the many things we do. So we help people with their speech sounds. We help people that have difficulty combining language, using language in the right context. We help people that have social communication, pragmatics, difficulties, using language in the right context. Yes, we also help people with their voice. Actually, we are the ones that are trained to work with people with voice difficulties, at least here in Australia. So people that have dysphonia, husky voices, or teachers singing voices, we work directly with teachers, singers, and people like that. We also work with people that have fluency disorders. I mentioned that before. So stuttering, that's our scope of, it falls under our scope of practice. We also work with people that have dysphagia. Dysphagia is a terminology for people that have swallowing. So it's called difficulty with swallowing. That's dysphagia. And that could be in children that are neonates, so children that were like preemies, like premature babies is what we call them. So they might have difficulty with swallowing. So we help, we give strategies to the parents in that early time of their lives to assist the child to be able to feed properly. I'm trying to rush through this because there's still a lot I haven't said. We also work with adults that have dysphagia, so adults that have had a stroke or have neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, Huntington's disease. We help modify their diets. We do assessments. Then when we see they can't tolerate different textures, a certain texture anymore, we modify the diet to make it softer so that they're not choking and they're not aspirating. Um, I feel like
You
I'm
just mentioned
yammering.
You just mentioned something that made me remember one of the old practices where people will force feed children because they can't take a certain meal. Oh my goodness.
Don't let's go there. Don't let's shake that table. Yeah, but yeah, the other thing I was going to mention is, I mean, here in Australia, we also work with people to implement augmentative and alternative communication. That's actually one of my areas of interest. I know it's a long word, but it's people that are non-verbal. So speech therapists can work with people that don't talk at all. I have a lot of clients that don't talk at all. They're mute. So how do we work with them? We give them alternatives to communication. So it could be a generating device. It could be something as simple as a paper that's been structured and it's a book that they have all their words that they use in there, and they've learned to open it so quick and so fast. So that's our job, to make sure that one of the things we pride ourselves in is that everyone must have a voice, whatever that looks like.
Everyone must have a voice in any way.
Yes.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing us a bit, telling us a bit into your world. Now let's talk about. There's something I wrote here. We mentioned it earlier. You mentioned it earlier. People will substitute sounds. To me, as a diction coach, I'll classify that as like a communication challenge for a child who I once taught in a primary school at one time. I went there for a few, I was called to give them a bit of like introduction to diction. And one particular child kept saying, Paul, Paul, Paul. She wanted to say, I was teaching them the numbers 1 to 10. So this child could not articulate 4. So she And not only for every word that starts with F, she was substituting it with B. So, can you give us what that is called
Yes.
and the solution strategies for if a teacher or if a parent is listening and that is the situation there?
Thank you. What that child is presenting with is a phonological process that is called stopping. So it's one of many phonological processes. So F to P, the stopping the F sound because it's um, a voiced consonant to a voiceless consonant. So if my articulation doesn't fail me right now, my knowledge from years back. But yes, so that's one of, usually children that have stopping would have some other phonological processes. It only takes 10 minutes with a speech therapist to pick up the sounds and we know what to do. So if the child does not have access to a speech therapist, um, it would require the parent to actually sit down, dedicate time every day to, because you don't know where the error is coming from. Is it that the sound is not stimulable? That child cannot pronounce that sound at all. If the child can pronounce the sound, then there's a bit of more easy work to do there because you can then teach the sound in isolation and then move on to blending the sound in words. To be very honest, that child will require therapy because it's not just that sound. And it's also getting the child to become aware of where the sound is produced in the mouth. That is why therapy is important, to teach the child where the place and the manner of articulation of that sound is. You could work on that sound for 2-3 months and then they start generalizing it in everyday context. So children do come up with phonological processes. Every child has a phonological process at every point in time, but they resolve it because that's how we learn. For example, you know how when children are growing up, they would say nana for banana. That's quite common. If they're doing it at the normal age appropriate level of maybe 2.5 to 3, that's fine. That's okay. But you would expect at a certain age for them to be able to speak, say the 3 syllables.
Properly.
So we all grew up having phonological processes. It's normal. But there comes an age when you expect, for example, you know how in Nigeria we say you don't know how to pronounce R, the R sound? That is actually a phonological process. That is actually a speech sound disorder, but we don't realize it is. So that person is gliding. They would say wabbit. Yeah, they would use that. It's actually something that could have been corrected when they were younger if they saw a speech therapist. Yeah. So
Thank you. Thank you
that
very
child
much. Let's
requires
go to
therapist. Yeah.
questions. So there's a question here from Jimmy Becker. Can you please talk more about ADHD symptoms in adults and how to pick this up with possible interventions? So that would be, I think that would be the only question we have.
I got a
And
question directly, but I'll let you know.
can you do that? Okay, you got the question directly, please.
Yes.
Answer this and answer that one, and I ask you one final question and we close.
Yeah. Look, like I said before, people with ADHD, they would thrive better on structure, maintaining structure, being very organized with what they do, having schedules. So if you're an adult and you think you might have ADHD, you would, I know people use meditation, like calming music sometimes to focus. Sometimes knowing what works for you to be able to focus is also important because a lot of adults mask ADHD. So anything that would make you procrastinate, try to avoid it. You might still need to talk to a psychologist or a therapist at some point, but these are things that you can start putting in place for yourself. If you have deadlines to meet and you feel like you struggle with that, breaking those tasks into easier tasks for yourself. Pacing yourself when it comes to communication. I'll just speak from a communication point of view. If you have ADHD or you think you might have ADHD, communication wise, pacing yourself, maybe telling yourself, I'm going to let the person I'm speaking to speak 2 sentences before I interrupt. So learning those strategies and really managing and using them, even if it means you sitting down in front of your phone and recording yourself, doing things, self-help skills before you see any therapist at all, because you've got to, it's not a disease, you've got a strength, but because of the society that we find ourselves, people expect people to behave in a certain way, and not everyone would understand. So you have to kind of, have those strategies in place to pace yourself, to know when to try and learn social cues when people are looking at me. What are they trying to? This is something I do every day too. So, looking at people, I teach people to learn nonverbal language. So when someone is not looking at me, does that mean I've probably spoken too much and I need to stop and ask them a question? So yes, but you might still need a bit of speech therapy there to teach you. I wouldn't say to teach you, but to communication skills. But yes. Oh, they're
All right.
telling us to open the pin. Is there a way you can do that? I've got no idea. Yes.
Okay. There was a network glitch, I guess. Okay.
No, they're just
Thank
asking
you.
us to pin the topic. But that's because I joined from my end. I'm not sure I can.
Yeah, sorry. So once I end this, so what you're going to do, Abimbola, is once we end this
Yeah.
conversation, you're going to share the media immediately, or maybe I'm going to end from my end so that we can make sure that this media does not go off. So immediately you end the conversation, try to share, or I would share from my end. I'll
Okay.
share the media.
Yeah.
It can be saved.
Okay.
Fantastic. So don't end from your
I will.
end.
I'll just let you do it.
Try to.
Yes. Yeah.
So I would like to ask you, I would like to know, is there a place of being spiritual as Christians in this instance? Is there a place of God in treatment of communication challenges? Can we take you remember the story that comes to mind is Moses when he was
Yes.
complaining to God, I can't go to the Egyptians, I can't go to Pharaoh, I'm a stammerer, and God kind of gave him a solution that I've prepared your brother
Yeah.
Aaron, who's going to speak on your behalf. But God still didn't say you're not going to go. He still
Yeah.
said you're going to go. So it's a place that we can say, God, help me in this
Yes.
communication challenge. Please tell
Definitely.
us.
Can we go to church a little? Okay. So I look at Moses. Moses is actually I love him so much when I think about my job, because I see a lot of my range of practice in how Moses lived his life. Moses used sign language, which is something we teach. Moses used AAC. Moses also had behavioral difficulties. He threw it tantrum when he threw the tablets of stones. So that was something that, if you look at how he threw the tablet of stones, that was anger. He probably didn't have the words to say, and he just got upset when he saw those guys, worshiping a different God. So I'm a Christian, and I believe strongly that God does not make mistakes. No matter what the child has presented with, there's a reason why that child has what they have, and there's a strength to that child. It's looking beyond what the problem might look like, and looking at, yes, we can trust, we are Christians, and we should trust God for miracles. But when we talk about children, this neurodiverse children, right, with children that have speech delays, that is why God has given people wisdom to, you know provide therapy to them. And as you're receiving therapy, you're praying alongside. I've actually, in my work, I pray for my clients. I might not pray for them directly if they don't want me to, but I pray for my clients, and I've seen significant differences in some of the ones that I felt a leading to really, really intercede for them. So it's not impossible. God can change situations around, but it's just like you being sick and saying you don't want to see the doctor. If your faith can carry it, why not? But if you feel like this child needs help, please do not wait. Please do not, as you're trusting God for a miracle regarding that child's difficulty, please see someone that can support them, because God gave them wisdom. Everything we do, for example, as a speech therapist, everything we do is evidence-based. It's gone through bodies of research, years and years of research. So God gave us wisdom to help people. And I think it will be a bit silly not to take that help when you see it, because even if God heals the child, what about you as a parent? Don't you think you need some knowledge on how to handle that child while the child is getting healed? So even if for that alone, I believe strongly that we should never put therapy or help aside. We can trust God, and we can continue to receive help, because He gave everyone wisdom for a certain reason.
Fantastic. And answer. Fantastic one answer there. Okay, as we close, what's your journey like from food science in Nigeria? I told you I was going to ask you that question. From food scientist and now a speech therapist, let's just have a bit of glimpse into your life before we close.
Okay.
How did that happen for you?
Thank you. So, as you know, my first degree in Nigeria was food science and technology. That's what I did for my first degree. And I attempted to continue that here. I actually got an admission I was doing my master's in Nigeria in food microbiology before I moved. I didn't finish it. I was just at the research point when I moved with my husband. But coming here, I wanted to pursue a further degree in food
Shout out
science, but
to Mr. Wale-Makinde.
but yeah, I just figured that there was not too much I could fit in. Like, as much as I loved the profession, I did not see how much influence I could have um, doing that here. So I got the admission at UQ, University of Queensland, but I decided not to go ahead with it. But then I went back to the basics. I then did a diploma of early childhood education and care, just because I had young kids and I wanted to just know how to do this better, I guess. I got the diploma, but then in my pursuit of knowing what to do, obviously praying and trusting God. I know that I love talking. I'm a bit of an extrovert there. But I was thinking of what
I
can I
remember
do.
your broadcasting days in NTA
Yes,
with Gomosho.
a lot of people don't know that I used to be a broadcaster at NTA during my uni days. So I know that I love communicating and speaking to people, but I guess also as a Christian, you want to think about how can you use your natural giftings that are not so much of a difficulty. Like, I just find that I flow with people. How can I use that to help people around me and also build something for myself in the process? So yes, I found speech therapy and then I was actually pregnant, 5 months pregnant when I started the master's. And then I did it. God helped me to be able to pursue that degree, which was quite full on, but God helped me through. And then I started working, and I've always worked in the community. So, yes, I would say I think God just led me there somehow. Yes, yes. I didn't know the extent of
I
my
tell
work until I
you,
finished. Yeah, I must say that. Yeah.
well done. Well done. Quite a journey there, and we
Yes,
thank God for your journey so far. And we can only wish you all the very best. Thank you so much, Abimbola Wale-Makinde, for gracing our Instagram live
thank you for
today.
having
Yes,
me.
we've been planning this for how many months now?
And I've been saying
Finally.
I'll get back to you.
Sisters talk, and sometimes I will say, my Instagram live, have you not forgotten?
Yeah,
Saying, sister, we will do it. We will
yeah.
do it.
Thank God.
But
Yeah,
finally,
yeah.
we thank God that today is the day. I want to say thank you to everyone that joined. I'm seeing some love emojis already. Kikelomo Awoshika, thank you. Jimmy Becker, thank you so much. Okay, someone says, okay, yes, Rio Lososa, thank you also for joining. Kenny,
Oh, I
Bitoye,
have a question
everybody.
here.
Okay,
Sorry to interrupt.
please go ahead.
Um, Ogunde said, can immunization cause a delay in the development of a child concerning speech and motor skills?
Okay.
This question I've heard people ask me before, but if we want to go science-based, there's no evidence to say immunization affects children's speech. Now, motor skills is a little bit different because if a child got immunization and then maybe it wasn't wrapped properly or something happened with the immunization site, I'm not a physiotherapist or a bone doctor, but it could be that something happened in the process of the immunization, not the vial itself, not the immunization vial. Anything can happen with bones. I can't say yes or no to that, but there's no evidence that links immunization to speech delays. If a child has speech delays, it's probably because of risk factors that I have mentioned earlier on in this life. So yes, that's all I can say on that. With gross motor skills, it's a little bit out of my scope of practice, so I'm very careful not to not to talk about that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kendi. for that question, and thank you, Abimbola, for answering it. We'll see you again some other time on another topic on
Thanks,
my
Joey.
Instagram live.
Oh, my sisters are here.
Thank
Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you everyone that supported Abimbola from Australia. We are sending you love from Nigeria right here in West Africa. We do hope we can do this some other time, and of course, Abimbola will help me share it on our
Yeah.
Instagram handle. I want to say thank you once again for coming. I do not take it for granted that you're my sister. I can just say come. No, I do not take
I'm
it for
always
granted.
here.
I thank you very much
Yes,
for coming.
thanks for
I
having me.
wish you well. Thank you to our brother in the Lord,
Yeah,
Architect Wale-Makinde. Thank you for the support.
it's
I
quiet.
love you. Thank you to Anu and Michael for the support so far. And for those who will watch this Instagram live later, I say thank you so much. It's been a whole lot of knowledge here. She mentioned a lot about, you know, understanding, talking to the child as well, and trying to pick things early in life. It is very, let's be observant. I think that's just the crux of everything. Let's be observant and don't take things to chance. As we're praying, let's also take the right steps, see
Yeah,
the expert. Thank you.
thank you.
Bye.
Alhamdulillah. So I'll let you end it. Yes.
Yes, let me see. I hope. Oh no, I can't end it too. You have to end it and save because it's telling me to leave.
Okay. I'm just
So
gonna
you end
I'll send the link to you first because I'm not sure what's happening.
once you
So
okay.
if I click on the X, does that end?
Then you're going to click
I
share
have to do this.
media.
Okay. So I click on the X and then share media. Okay.
Share media. Don't
Let's
click
see.
the scan. Immediately you click share media. You share it on your
Great.
page.
Just so I'm clear, it's the X that I click on, right?
Yes,
Okay.
you click the X and it
Holy Spirit,
says
help us.
share
Okay.
media. Don't click the discard media. You're going to click share media.
Okay.
I'm
And
praying